what really happened with your host, Mike Rivero, because World War III is a really bad idea. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Thursday, September 20th, 2018. Sure happy it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. We have got a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, ready to answer the phone, put you on the air with your comments, questions, and observations. So let's get right on into it. And apparently there has been another mass shooting in Maryland. They're second in less than a year, and it appears to be another workplace shooting. Details have not come on out other than it took place at a Rite Aid distribution center. And they're saying multiple people were killed and injured, and they have a suspect in custody. So, of course, the gun grabbers are going to be out there saying, we got to ban the guns, we got to ban the guns, we got to ban the guns. No, we need to look at what is putting the American population under such stress that they turn to these kinds of actions. A lot of these shootings turn out to be workplace shootings. People who are desperate to hang on to their jobs, they get fired, they don't think the reasons are fair. And then you have to factor in those prescription antidepressants, which we all know are a problem that nobody wants to acknowledge. So let's get on back here to the war zones, emphasis on the plural here. And a lot of people are still weighing in on Putin's response to the downing of the Ilyushin-20 aircraft over Syria. And the hardliners are saying, you know, we got to go get Israel, we got to do this, we got to do that. Israel is still out there saying, well, it was really Assad's fault and Iran's fault, because if they were just doing what we told them to do, it wouldn't have happened. A lot of people are saying ultimately it's the fault of the United States for having been in Syria for 7 years trying to overthrow Assad. But ultimately it comes down to the fact that Israel was using this aircraft as a radar cover to penetrate Syrian airspace. Now, Israel has already changed their story and said the 4 F-16s had already turned around and left Syria before the Ilyushin was shot down. Nobody really knows because everybody's keeping a tight hand on the data, as it were. But there are some people out there saying this may have been a deliberate provocation to try and get Russia to do something. Because every time the U.S. wants to start a war, they work to make sure the other side shoots first. So the U.S. can cry, victim, 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 and we've got to strike back and rally around the flag, blah, 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 blah. And Putin is not biting it. He's taking the high ground. He's looking at economic sanctions. He's taking Israel to the ICC. And I agree with the way he's handling this. He's not letting himself get provoked into doing something which could really, set off a regional war. Putin is anti-war. He has demonstrated that time and time again. And despite the corporate media propaganda about Russian aggression here and Russian aggression there and Russia's aggressing over here, they took my parking spot. It's the U.S. and Israel and Europe that are constantly trying to grab more territory and invade other people's countries. And Russia has stepped in to try and halt the American aggression, is really what's going on. Now, Russia has just kicked off snap drills off the coast of Syria. And they're basically running their ships around and testing their radars and everything. It seems to be in response to the shoot down of the Ilyushin-20 plane. We know that Russia and Syria have now linked their air defense systems to hopefully avoid that kind of a mistake. Now, these snap drills are going to last about a week. They will last until the 26th. And some people are looking at the drills as a show of force and a warning to Israel, which certainly makes sense. All those U.S. drills and NATO drills are meant to be a warning and a threat against Russia. But what's really interesting is that Russia, for the duration of these drills, has imposed a no-fly zone for Israeli military aircraft around Syria. This according to the Hal Turner radio show, and I know a lot of people don't think he's trustworthy, but this is where the report is coming from. And the no-fly zone is basically, they issued a NOTAM, a notice to aviators and mariners. There'll be a no-fly zone from sea level up to flight level 190 until September 26th, which basically they're saying they're going to be live fire missile drills. And that any aircraft operating outside the sovereign territory of Israel in violation of the no-fly zone risks being shot down. And notice they didn't say that it was any foreign aircraft. At least according to Hal Turner, this is specifically directed at Israel. Okay, we're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. And we're going to take a phone call from Layla in Ontario. Layla, welcome back to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. I'd like to just ask you if you think that Israel is acting on its own or whether there are players behind it other than the U.S.?
Well, I think the entire coalition was involved in that attack on Friday. It's been confirmed that at least one French frigate was launching missiles into Syria. And from the sheer number of missiles involved, it had to be more than just one ship. It certainly was more than just the 4 Israeli aircraft. So I would say that probably a lot of those ships out there in that fleet were launching missiles.
What about England? Are they in any way involved, do you think, or are they pulling the strings behind the scenes? I mean, obviously I have a bias against England. It's a visceral thing with me. And it's my belief that Israel was created with England's help in order to allow England to continue to control its colonies through the Suez Canal to have access to them. As you know, they also dominated Egypt and Lord Moyne. And when the Zionists finally took over Palestine, and the British sent the Scottish Highland Regiment to be the primary police of the Palestinians to subdue them and assist the Zionists, they drove out the British, the English, primarily, I think, well, the British, because the Scots were involved. They drove them out because they knew that England had only put them there as a puppet regime, whereas Israel actually wanted to dominate the region.
Yes.
So there was, this is just my hypothesis, that there was a rivalry between the two. And that is why Israel today, or many of the Zionist people that I know, still condemn the British for not letting them have Jordan as well. But I was remembering why I have such a distaste for the word Great Britain, because if you look at the lyrics of Rule Britannia, they're utterly offensive. Rule Britannia, rule the waves. Britons never, never, never shall be slaves. When Britain first at heaven's command arose from out of the azure main, this was the charter of the land, and guardian angels sang this strain. Essentially, it's the divine right of England. And if anyone reads the poem written in 1791 by Robert Burns, he refers to British gold was our bane. Traitors were bought and sold for English gold. So once they dominated Scotland and they got the lords, the clan lords of Scotland to betray their tenants and drive them off the land, and the English bribed them with titles and money, Scotland became a tool, and every colony where England went, the Highland Regiment was their most powerful soldiers. But I don't for a moment believe that this is now, I mean, it's taken me many years to come to this conclusion and look at the patterns, but I believe that Israel is still trying to assert itself as the dominant power, And while France may be out in the open, I don't know what role England is playing. Certainly, they're not about to give up on their notion of having the divine right to rule the world, with all the other nations, as they call them. They were utterly condescending.
Layla,
in the
can
way
I cut in here? Can I cut in here a little bit here, because rulers may talk about divine right and gods and everything, but that's just for the masses. The real root cause of every war in history is basically economic. Wealth, control of territory, control of trade routes, and as far as the coalition is involved around the U.S., it is economic. They want Assad out of power. They want Syria under puppet rule, at which point they can all go in and share in the loot that will be taken out of the country in vast amounts. In terms of Israel, they simply want Syria to be smashed as a regional power. They want to keep the Golan permanently. And they also, of course, they want that pipeline going through Syria so they can take that oil and gas from underneath the Golan and sell it to Europe. So that's a big factor. You need to get away from the idea that wars are started for just one reason. Usually you'll have a whole bunch of different...
I agree completely. And I don't know if you've read the link to the video I sent you that described how England has, or Britain, I guess, has managed to hide all its assets outside of London, outside of England, on the small islands that used to be former colonies. Once the material empire began to disintegrate, England started building up an economic empire, and they kept it offshore. And Panama Papers is only one example. They started with the Cayman Islands. It's a very powerful documentary that describes how they've managed to drain the funds. And one thing that I learned from that documentary I didn't know before was the City of London is separate from Greater London. The City of London has its own Lord Mayor, and that's where the Bank of England is located.
A lot of people have compared that to the Vatican, which is a state within a state, and the City of London does wield tremendous financial power. The City of London is the British equivalent of our Wall Street, where all the wealth and political control that wealth can buy resides there. Yes,
and it goes back to the time of William the Conqueror, who wasn't able to conquer the City of London, so he allowed it freedom to operate on its own, and it often does without abiding by the rules that are normally applied across the rest of Britain.
Yes.
So and many countries have nations within nations. In fact, one could even say that political parties are a nation within a nation. I mean, look at the Democratic Party and what they're trying to do in terms of bringing down the overall ruling power. And last week when I talked about them as being anarchists, what I meant is that they're trying to remove the duly elected leader. When people try to do that, they are without having something in place already or a better system prepared to step in, then they're creating chaos.
They're creating chaos, but again, looking at the deep state, looking at the liberals, to me it is very obvious they already have a planned new government they want to foist on us, and it's going to be quite tyrannical. It's not going to be based on the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. They've been telegraphing. They absolutely hate the Second Amendment. They want limits on the First Amendment. And it's very, very Orwellian. Anyway, Layla, the phone lines are loading up, so I'm going to have to let you go here. Thank you very much for the phone call. And again, wars are never started for just one reason. You have a bunch of rulers and a bunch of nations, and they've each got their own agenda. Get rid of a regional threat, grab more territory, capture the targeted nation's resources, or remove them as a political or economic threat. That's the reason that Germany was made war on twice, in Big Mistake 1 and Big Mistake 2. They were a manufacturing powerhouse against which Great Britain and the United States could not then compete. And that's why World War I is a good example. It started as a war between Austria-Hungary and Serbia, and somehow in the middle of it all, Germany became the big, bad, ugly enemy, because Germany was the economic threat of the time. All right, we're going to go back to the phones here. Ken in Missouri, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, here's my read on things. Going back to your point about the news cycle, they wanted a clean cycle. The corporate media is still doing Kavanaugh sexual assault nonstop.
Yes.
And I'm pretty sure Israel is basically going to violate the no-fly rule, even if they do it with a drone. You shoot down a drone, and then the news cycle starts. Russia attacked Israel. And even the most ardent, the AIPAC fund paid for Democrats will be rooting for war against Russia at that point.
Well, I don't think the American people are going to be willing to send their children off to be killed and crippled in a war with Russia over a drone. But you're right. I'm expecting that somebody will run a freedom of navigation exercise through the area, whether it's going to be Israel or the United States. And again, it's attempting to provoke Russia to make the first move so that they will be seen as the bad guy.
But, I mean, could you imagine the headline, Russia attacks Israel? Could you just imagine that with what's been going on for the last 2 years? I mean, that would just, every Christian church in America would just rise up and go, this is Bible prophecy, this is Ezekiel 38. They've been priming this pump now for years.
Yes.
That the Great Bear would come down and attack Israel. And I mean, we're all just so sick and tired of it, but the way this is playing out, again, like you correctly pointed out, they want a clean news cycle when the war goes in Syria. And right now, this Kavanaugh thing, if you watch the ping pong, the back and forth, you know, will Ford testify? No, she won't testify. She wants an FBI. Now Grassley says you got a 10 a.m. deadline. Testify or don't. I mean, they're just ping-ponging back and forth, and none of this stuff is getting covered about the war. And like I said, if Israel so much sends a drone over there, it's going to get shot down. And who knows, all those retired generals that sit on Fox News and bloviate day in and day out for American exceptionalism. I've had enough. So thanks, Mike.
All right, you're welcome. Yeah, I'm pretty sick and tired of that as well. My concern about the absence of coverage about what's going on over in Syria is based on the fact that in the months leading up to 9/11, the foreign press knew the United States had a plan to invade Afghanistan in October of 2001. It was in BBC, was in Jane's Defense. It was reported all over the rest of the world. The American people had no idea that was going down because we were getting nothing in the corporate media except about Gary Condit and Chandra Levy. Were they lovers? Did he kill her? And the coverage was nonstop. They had helicopters in the sky watching Gary Condit cross the street, and commentators out there saying, will he stay within the lines? I don't know, Bill. You know, he's a wild man. He may stray outside those crosswalk lines. And so I coined the term conditizing because when 9/11 happened, it came as a totally unexpected shock to the American people. And that shock basically just propelled the American people into immediate support of whatever it was the U.S. government was going to do in retaliation. And I'm getting the same feeling now that the reason the wars are being de-emphasized in the corporate media, they don't want us thinking about them. They don't want us worried about how close to an outright conflict we are, so that when and if they decide to pull a false flag, and it's going to have to be a doozy, because planes into skyscrapers, been there, done that, didn't buy the t-shirt. They want the shock value of it to trigger an emotional reaction that will override our natural skepticism. Okay, we got to take a break for commercials, and we will be back with more phone calls after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, and we're going to go back to the phone lines to Frank in London. Aloha, Frank. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Mike, your previous caller, before your last call, I was really impressed with her take on, knowledge on history. However, I don't go with the opinion that England is somehow pulling the strings behind what happened, the incident, what happened, because you've got to remember that we have a very powerful Zionist lobby in this country, you know, so you need to be a bit more specific than that. Yes, England might have them, but it's controlled by the Zionists in this country. Very powerful, very, very influential. And my other take is, what on earth is happening in your country? Has it sunk to such a low level now that I can see this Judge Kavanaugh thing being played out, and I think I think Trump needs to put a stop to it. They need to put a stop to it now, because it's just going to drag out, and it's obviously a pack of lies. There is no way you can just accuse someone of that sort of crime, and you know, it sounds like you're guilty before you even can prove your own innocence. It's crazy.
Yeah, it is crazy. And, of course, that's the legacy of the militant feminism of the 1990s. Accusation equals guilt. And you can see all these liberal politicians standing up and saying, oh, yeah, we've got to take her at her word. She doesn't need to prove it actually happened. You know, to heck with presumption of innocence. This is a woman. And, women do lie about sexual harassment and sexual assault, and they destroy men's lives doing it, and that's just a reality of modern life here. But I think the American people who are following along on this are getting a first-class education on just how decadent our political system has become. Because most people are looking at this and saying, it's obvious this is just another smear job, and yet everybody in Congress, everybody in the Senate is pretending like it's serious business, and they're just arguing back and forth with each other. And we're going to have more about the Kavanaugh hearings a little bit later in the show.
Okay, well, because it's ridiculous. I think I better not try and get a job in politics. I might get accused of a wink at someone at school or something. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, no, I would never. I joked about running for president back in 2016, but in reality, I would never, ever consider running for public office, because I've been involved tangentially in local politics here, and even that just left a bad taste in my mouth. And I really do have better things to do with my life. Anyway, Frank, thanks an awful lot for the phone call. We're going to switch over to Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha, Dustin. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Mike, I'm the gentleman from London. I hope you know that they're going to have an internet regulator over there soon. So,
Yep.
That tells you where you're going. And, Layla was kind of wrong. I mean, I have to agree with him and not Layla. This is a globalist. It's basically a merger with Zionist, neoliberalism, and Wahhabism. They're all linked together. It doesn't matter what country you're in. They're all got the same ideologies. You know, Britain, France, United States, Canada, we all see the same playbook, right?
Yes.
So they're all linked together. That's the problem. Sweden, the West. And throw in some Middle East countries and Israel, obviously. Hey, Mike, I don't know if you're aware of this, but the Slava class ship, the Moskva, is in the Med, and that has 16 Vulcan anti-ship missiles, and I don't know if you know this, it has 64 S-300F missile, 8 times 8. It's got 64 missiles on there. That's a packing a punch, that ship.
Yes.
I think this is not going to happen. Mike, if this happens again with something with Russia, Putin will have to respond, because from what I'm hearing, there's people in the Ministry of Defense and the Kremlin that wanted him to do more. He did what he should have done, extend this drill, extending the range of this no-fly zone, basically, right? I think that's exactly what he should have done. I don't know if you agree with me or...
Yeah, I do. I think Putin is trying to keep the situation from escalating, even though in his heart of heart, he has to know that's exactly where Israel and the United States are taking it. And at some point, Putin is going to have to just accept that war with the West is inevitable. And I think everybody's just choosing sides and getting ready for what everybody seems to know is coming, and nobody seems willing to stop.
Yeah, because like I said, if this happens again, yeah, I mean, the chess piece is already moving into play. Hey, Mike, I don't know if you heard this rumor. Did the French ship actually launch missiles? Because there was a rumor that maybe there was a Dolphin-class sub that did the launching by the French ship as cover, you know? That's a rumor. I mean, I don't know if it's true or not, but
I don't think
is it possible?
I don't think the Dolphin-class submarine can launch a Tomahawk cruise missile. They have their own, which is called the Popeye, which potentially can carry a nuclear warhead. But no, I think we've been seeing the United States telegraph escalation, escalation, escalation for weeks. Friday was it. And it was time to derail this deal that Turkey and Russia had made to avoid going into Idlib. Anyway, Dustin, do you have more or do you want to hang up?
Oh, that's it.
All right. Thanks for the phone call. We've got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Now, in a sign of even more escalation in the Eastern Mediterranean, the USS carrier Harry Truman and its support group have now entered the Mediterranean. They transited the Straits of Gibraltar. This is according to the press service of the United States Navy. The official announcement is the Truman is there to support NATO allies against Russian aggression. But basically, it's more firepower coming in to smash Syria with. And I understand that Russia is, in fact, under the cover of this no-fly zone. They're flying in additional S-300 missiles to Syria because apparently one of the targets that was struck during the Israeli attack, French attack, U.S. attack on Syria Friday was a cargo plane sitting on the runway at the Damascus airport, and Israel is claiming it was carrying Iranian weapons. No proof, of course, but if it was, then Iran needs to realize they've got a mole. They've got a spy that they've been find right now. But I imagine that Putin is going to use the next 6 days of the declared no-fly zone to rearm Syria and try and get weapons parity down there to try and discourage any more attacks here. Meanwhile, the Russian military police and representatives for the Russian Reconciliation Center for the opposing sides in Syria are jointly patrolling the liberated communities in Quneitra province and the demilitarized zone. They're keeping the peace along that border between Syria and Israel, meaning the northern part of the Golan Heights. And Israel is making a big stink that they absolutely would not allow Syrian forces or Iranian forces anywhere near that border, which may have been intended as a pretext to create a new buffer zone, because that's a tactic Israel will use. Oh, we have to invade. We have to create a security buffer zone of 10 miles or so. And, oh, that's not enough. They've got better weapons. We need to grab another 10 miles or so and just nibble away at the other country bit by bit. Over in Afrin, thousands of people are demonstrating against the Turkish military presence. And Turkey, when they first went on in there, they said it was basically to deal with rebels, the Kurdish rebels, and they were going to leave, but they have not left. And the people of Afrin are saying, it is time for you to go. Meanwhile, over in Lebanon, Hezbollah has said it will remain in Syria as long as Damascus wants it to. This is in response to Israel's demand that Hezbollah leave Syria. And it's rather revealing about Israel's arrogance that they're sitting inside Israel and demanding other countries leave Syria. They're demanding Iran leave Syria. They're demanding Hezbollah leave Syria. They want the Russians to leave Syria. so that Syria is going to be easier to conquer and destroy. And all of these various other parties are saying, no, you don't get to tell us what we're doing. We're here at the invitation of the government of Syria, the legitimate government of Syria, and we're going to stay here. And I'm sure that's probably a major reason why the U.S. has gone back to simply saying, we're going to get rid of Assad. We're going to tear out the legitimate government of Syria, as we have done to so many other countries, and we're going to put in a new puppet ruler who will immediately demand that Hezbollah, Iran, and Russia get the heck out of Dodge. Over in Iran, they have built a new launch site for the S-300 strategic surface-to-air missile system at Mashhad Airport in the northeast of the country. This is coming out of satellite imagery. And apparently construction began on this back in May. And it's almost identical to the S-300 base at Tehran's Marabad International Airport. But it has pads for only 2 launchers instead of the usual 4. Now, the U.S. is back to saying that they want to negotiate a new treaty with Iran. In other words, we have all but ruined your economy and will back off if you do what we tell you. And of course, the treaty is not just the nuclear issue, it's the long-range ballistic missiles. And they've thrown in a new one, Iran's regional behavior. How dare you go into Syria just because they asked you to? Now, Iran continues to reject U.S. attempts to negotiate a new treaty since Donald Trump tore up the nuclear deal between Tehran and the U.S. But Tehran is still in compliance with that deal, and the rest of the signatories are still signaling they wish the deal to go forward. It was working. Iran had stopped enrichment. Iran was letting other countries build their fuel rods. And there was never any evidence that Iran was seeking nuclear weapons. It was just another big lie like Saddam's nuclear weapons. But it's all a pretext leading up to war. And there's a very revealing article over here in Aleppo News, provoking a path to Persia. And they're talking about another think tank, the Saban Center for Middle East Policy, which recently came out with a policy paper, Which Path to Persia? Options for a New American Strategy Towards Iran. And it reminds a lot of people of a document put out by the Project for the New American Century, Rebuilding America's Defenses. And the authors noted in this new Which Path to Persia document, it seems highly unlikely that the United States would mount an invasion without any provocation or other buildup. And that is reminiscent of a similar statement in Rebuilding America's Defenses, where it said this militarization of the United States is going to take a very long time, absent some catalyzing event, which is where they signaled there was going to be a big bang, a new Pearl Harbor, to get Americans on board with spending all of our money on bombs, bullets, and bandages. So the semaphores are up there. Iran is in the crosshairs, and Iran has to know it. So another article, this one out of Information Clearinghouse, talking about the Iran hawks in Washington. And it's talking about all the numerous Zionist-run think tanks that basically write U.S. foreign policy. And they are clearly ratcheting up anti-Iran anger in the U.S. Or they're trying to. I don't know that a lot of people are buying it. Because American people, first of all, they're not watching the corporate media anymore. And second, they're very distrustful of anything the government or corporate media says. And these think tanks are highly subsidized by the U.S. State Department and by the U.S. military security complex, the Foundation for the Defense of Democracy, which is definitely cheerleading for more war. Okay, article coming on out of the Jerusalem Post, so take it with a grain of salt. Will Iraqi territory be used to fire rockets on Israel from Iran? So right now, Israel is talking about, we got to conquer Syria to get Iran out of Syria and get the Iranian threat against Israel out of Syria. Iran is not going to attack Israel. First of all, they don't attack other countries. They haven't initiated a war of conquest in over 200 years. Second of all, Iran knows Israel has nuclear weapons. It's just Israel wants to grab off more of Syria for Eretz Israel and for whatever oil and gas wealth may be underneath it. Now, apparently, they are turning covetous eyes to portions of Iraq. Oh, we have to grab these pieces of Iraq. You know, Iran could use them to threaten us. It is a little silly. All right, we're going to take a phone call now. Bob in New Jersey, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. You there?
I'm here.
Hello?
Yes, you're on the air.
Okay, all right. The S-200 missile that shot down that Russian reconnaissance aircraft, it doesn't make any sense. They have what's called a IFF, identification friend or foe, and I'm sure the software is upgraded on all those missiles, even though they're old. It's not capable of shooting down another Russian aircraft.
Well, I haven't confirmed that the S-200 had the IFF. In fact, I'm looking at a technical description of it right now, and I'm not seeing it here. Let me just scroll on down. It's entirely possible. No, it does. As a matter of fact, it does. It does have IFF. So maybe the IFF was being jammed, or it may be the fact that the Syrians that were firing the missile weren't linked into the Russian air defense system and did not get the identifier for that airplane. Because it's not just like I'm going to wave at you and you wave back. The codes have to be constantly changed on both the radar systems and the aviation assets so that they can't be copied and used. And it may be that it could be there was a wrong code on it.
Well, it just seems strange that a radio reconnaissance aircraft with all the bells and whistles wouldn't identify itself as a friend.
Well, again, if they had one IFF code and the Syrian S-200 radar system was looking for a different code, there would be an issue there. It's, again, it may have been jammed. I don't think Syria intended to shoot down the Russian Ilyushin-20. Syria clearly wanted to get those Israeli F-14s.
Correct. Yeah. Maybe electronic warfare? They jammed it?
Like I said, that's a real possibility. And whether the jamming came from the Israelis who were in the immediate vicinity or some other standoff asset, we don't really know. But something clearly went wrong there.
Right. But the French frigate fired some surface-to-air missiles, didn't they?
My understanding is the French frigate fired surface-to-surface missiles. They fired cruise missiles that were targeted on like an ammunition warehouse.
All right. Yeah. They wouldn't have targeted an aircraft. Okay.
Yeah, they were too far out. Remember, they're on the far side of that Russian fleet.
Yeah, something just doesn't make sense here. I think everybody's feeling something that isn't right with this.
Well, it could have been done deliberately. It could have been that the Israelis did shoot the plane down, and Putin came up with a story about an accidental shoot down in order to not be goaded into a conflict. I mean, remember when John F. Kennedy was assassinated? The planted evidence all pointed to a Cuban plot to get the American people on board with another invasion of Cuba. But President Johnson knew about the secret warning that Khrushchev and Kennedy had shared at the end of the Cuban Missile Crisis. At the next time there was a U.S. invasion of Cuba, the Soviet Union would launch a nuclear attack. period, end of discussion. And so
Right.
Johnson basically reworked the story and dumped it all on crazed lone nut assassin Lee Harvey Oswald.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I just thought I'd share that with you. I love
All
your
right.
show. Thank you.
Yeah,
right.
we have confirmed the S200 system does have integrated IFF, and so something went wrong. They didn't have the right codes, or the signals were being jammed by somebody. Over in Germany, Germany had, in response to human rights activists, made a promise that they were going to stop selling weapons to Saudi Arabia for use in Yemen. And like so many other countries, Germany has now reneged on that promise. And Economy Minister has greenlit a new round of artillery systems for sale to the Saudis. And the systems are designed for precise counterattack and are clearly being bought explicitly for use in Yemen. Yet the Merkel government, as part of its coalition deal, announced a full export ban to any sides fighting in Yemen, including the Saudis. So they're saying one thing and they're doing something else. And Yemen is going to be a disaster. I do think the Houthis ultimately are going to use. I admire their courage for fighting on like this. But once Hodeidah is taken, I think the writing is definitely going to be on the wall. And human rights activists and organizations are saying there are now 5.2 million Yemenite children who are starving right now. And it's being done deliberately. And that is a war crime here. Okay, Montenegro is going to join the NATO Baltic Battle Group in Latvia. And this is part of Montenegro having recently joined NATO, which again was a violation of the promise made to the Russian republics. After the fall of the Soviet Union, NATO said, we're not going to go any further to the east than we are right now, because Russia was very concerned about this constant expansion of NATO. And NATO just went ahead and did it anyway. So Montenegro is now caught up with that. Britain's Defense Secretary Gavin is basically saying Russia should shut up. I guess he's taking lessons from Macy Hirono. And he's toured Ukraine and the eastern part of the country, where Ukrainian officials are saying this is the front line in a war against Russian aggression. And no, it is not, because Russia has not crossed the Ukrainian border into the eastern Ukrainian republics, who are fighting a war of secession. But the corporate media and officialdom, they're going to keep up that drumbeat. Russian aggression, Russian aggression, Russian aggression. And frankly, it's boring. We got to take another break for commercials, and we'll be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and we're still talking about the increasing tensions in all of these flashpoints around the world. And I really do think that 50 years from now, history books will say that we were already in World War III at this moment in time, and probably even a year or two back. And a lot of people are being killed, a lot of very beautiful buildings being destroyed, and all for greed, all for oil pipeline rights of way, all for not just the oil itself, but to control what currency that oil is sold for. The U.S. wants to keep the world enslaved to the U.S. dollar. That's their motive for all these wars here. Okay, soldiers from 8 foreign militaries, including the United States, will converge on Ukraine next month for the country's largest aviation exercise yet. And it's called Operation Clear Sky, and it will train these pilots So, in air sovereignty, air interdiction, air-to-ground integration, air mobility operations, aeromedical evaluation, cyber defense, and personnel delivery. This is reported in Stars and Stripes. So they're pouring more personnel and arms into Ukraine. So I wonder what the bookies in Las Vegas are placing odds. Where's the next big war going to break on out? Is it going to be Syria or Ukraine? Or maybe both. Maybe the strategy is to stick Russia with a two-front war and divide their resources. As you know, yesterday Poland is renewing an offer. They want a permanent U.S. military base in Poland for which they're willing to put up $2 billion, which sounds like a lot of money, but it's not even going to cover the entire cost of the base construction, let alone the cost of continuing to run the base year after year after year after year. So this is going to be another huge drain on the Treasury. And why are they building this base? Well, we've got to oppose Russian aggression here. And the Polish are trying to sweeten the deal by declaring that they want this new base to be named Fort Trump. Now, we've mentioned before, Trump is very susceptible to flattery. And apparently the Polish government has picked up on that. Down in Pakistan, their army is supporting terrorists in the tribal areas of Pakistan to attack Afghan, U.S., and NATO forces. So that's heating up there, and Pakistan and China are looking to strengthen bilateral military ties. Everybody's choosing sides for the coming conflagration. We were talking before about Israel demolishing this Bedouin village, Khan al-Ahmar. They basically tore it down back on the 14th. And people are looking at the location and say, this is all about building a corridor. We'll talk about this after station identification. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And we were talking before the break here about Israel's demolition of Khan al-Ahmar back on the 14th. And part of it is, it's out there in East Jerusalem, which is supposed to be Palestinian territory. And if you look at its strategic location, it's clear this is another step in Israel's plan of simply breaking up Palestinian land into small, isolated islands so there can never be a contiguous Palestinian state. And apparently this village is also the last obstacle facing the E1 zone project, which is an Israeli plan that wants to link the illegal Jewish colonies in occupied East Jerusalem with West Jerusalem. This would cut off East Jerusalem completely from its Palestinian environs in the West Bank. So bit by bit by bit, Israel is just stealing other people's land. Apparently, there were riots on Yom Kippur, which was yesterday. 2 Palestinians were killed, 46 wounded by the IDF fire in the northern Gaza Strip. And again, I admire the courage of the Gazans. They just keep going up to that fence to peacefully protest and demand their right of return, and Israel just keeps shooting them down here. Now, there's a new report by Palestinian prisoners' rights group Adamir that claims Israeli officials routinely carry out torture at a key interrogation facility right smack in the middle of occupied East Jerusalem. And the report, which is titled, "I've Been There, A Study of Torture and Inhumane Treatment in Al-Moskabaya Interrogation Center," is based on the testimony of 138 individuals held in the Russian compound of Jerusalem during the period of 2015 to 2017. So remember that statement Israel made the other day declaring that they have a right to basically ignore international law? They're certainly behaving like it. Now, this part is getting a little bit scary. apparently over in the Trump administration, their top civil rights enforcer at the U.S. Department of Education, Kenneth Marcus, literally is saying he wants college students prosecuted for Israel protests. And apparently Marcus was captured on camera during a September 2016 meeting with an undercover reporter working on Al Jazeera's documentary about the U.S.-Israel lobby. And by the way, the third segment has been, I'm sorry, I was confusing that with Project Veritas. That documentary is getting leaked out bit by bit by bit. But basically, at the time, Marcus was director of the Louis D. Brandeis Center for Human Rights Under Law, which is an Israel lobbying group unaffiliated with Brandeis University. And the Brandeis Center specializes in lawfare, the use of legal proceedings to harass and silence Israel's critics. They don't care if they win or lose the lawsuits. They just want to bankrupt the critics, to silence them. So now this guy is in the Department of Education, and he wants students prosecuted for supporting Palestine or criticizing Israel. Somebody's going to have to take this up to the Supreme Court, and that may be another reason why there's so much opposition to Kavanaugh, because despite his loose interpretation of the Fourth Amendment, he has certainly shown himself throughout his career to be a champion of the First Amendment. And if the Democrats can swing that Supreme Court back liberal, they might be able to actually get their Israel exception to the First Amendment. But it's censorship. There's no other word for it. We have elements of the United States government ignoring the First Amendment right to freedom of speech in service to a foreign master. And that really should wake people up. So Israel is now publicizing the discovery of a red heifer, the first one born in Israel in 2,000 years, which is funny because I thought there was one that was born about 15 years ago, but I guess that one didn't qualify. And the red heifer is significant both to Jewish and Christian fundamentalists. And the legend is, the myth is, once a red heifer is born, they will be able to rebuild the third temple on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, which means, of course, they're going to have to tear down what stands there at the moment, the Dome of the Rock. That's not going to go down well. I read about all this stuff here, and it reminds me of this movie, The Kingdom of Heaven. And it really is a very well-made movie, and if you get a chance to see it, you really should. Okay, we're going to do a shout-out to our honor affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. Apparently, Palestinian Authority President Abbas says he's ready to halt all funding to Gaza. And this has to do with the struggle between Abbas' Fatah faction and Hamas. Now, Egypt was trying to basically get them to cooperate with each other and unify, and obviously neither Israel nor the United States would like that, but apparently the negotiations have reached a dead end. Now, the European Union sent a delegation to take a look at what's going on in Gaza, because there's been so much wild claims going back and forth about what a terrible threat Gaza is to Israel. And so the group from the European Parliament was scheduled to arrive in Gaza earlier today, and they went all that way and they were denied access. And the delegates said they wanted to monitor the humanitarian situation caused by a decade of blockade there during a 3-day mission. And so after being barred from entering the enclave, the head of the delegation basically said that Israel's actions in Gaza, as far as they can tell, do constitute war crimes. Okay. getting back to the idea of deliberate provocation, the United States has put 33 Russian intelligence and military officials on the sanctions blacklist. This actually came out of U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, and they're just adding these to the sanctions list. And apparently, Washington is imposing new sanctions on a Chinese military unit over the fact that they purchased Russian jets and missiles. And those Chinese sanctions went into effect immediately. And it's this weaponization of sanctions and the use of them as a club that I think is destroying the image of the United States around the world. You know, how dare you buy weapons from Russia? You buy weapons from us. No, theirs are better and cheaper. That doesn't matter. We will sanction you. It's crazy. The whole world's going crazy right now. All right, let's take a phone call. Mark in North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Mike. Oh, by the way, I was watching something. I was looking at RT before. They're actually, I don't know if you mentioned it, they're actually threatening to sanction China for buying weapons from Russia.
Yeah.
These people are crazy. Trump is nuts. But anyway, I just want to ask you something. What is it you think that has this kind of influence Israel has over the United States? I mean, this is really treason when you think about it. You know, obeying basically the orders of a foreign nation and catering to them, and even risking World War III to do it. Why? You know, what do you think it is? Do you think it's because of money? Do you think because you got a lot of rich Jews like what's his name, Sheldon Adelson? Mm-hmm. Or do you think maybe it has something to do with religion? You know, both the Jewish and Christian Zionists with their crazy beliefs. I don't know. What do you think is causing this?
It's a combination of all three, along with blackmail and control of the media, and a lot of concerned people have been talking about the growing influence of Israel over the U.S. government going back decades. But our politicians are willing to sell out. Certainly, this dual citizen issue is a serious problem, and the United States is one of the very few countries that allows dual citizens to operate inside their government. And
that's what I was going to say. Really, dual citizen. If you're a dual citizen, you shouldn't be able to have any kind of a government job. I don't even think dual citizenships should be allowed. You're either an American citizen or get out. Period. Or certainly you don't have the rights of an American citizen. Well, why should you have, but to actually employ dual citizens of any type in very key parts of the U.S. government is crazy. I just don't understand it. What is this country doing to itself? And on top of that, we're leading ourselves closer and closer to World War III. I think, if I'm not mistaken, Russia is about to put a no-fly zone on right now in certain parts of Syria. And, what's going to happen then? They should, personally, I believe they should give the Syrians the S-4, the S-400. I think next time the Israeli planes come around and try to mess around, shoot them down, period. And it's the same thing to U.S. planes. If U.S. planes want to come and attack Syria for no reason, well, now they're facing the S-400. Because this is crazy. It's got to end. Something's got to stop this. Maybe if you did have a little bit of a conflict between the U.S. and Russia, maybe, and it didn't, escalate right away, maybe the people in this country would finally start to get smart and say no, 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 no. And maybe even somehow the U.S. military would understand their responsibility to the Constitution of this country and the real defense of this country, and say, you know what, we're refusing. We're not shooting at anybody over there. We're not getting involved in this. We're going to disobey our orders. We're mutiny, and that's it. There's nothing you can do about it. There's nothing they could do about it if the military did it, the proper way. And I believe the mid-level officers and the enlisted men are capable of doing it. The generals are mostly hacks, so I wouldn't count too much in the generals. But I think below general, I think there's a good possibility that could be done. And I pray that, I don't know, I pray it's going to happen because, like you said, World War III is not a very nice thing. Nuclear war could be pretty bad for your day. Okay? You talk about global warming, we'd really have our global warming by then.
Yeah, we definitely would. We definitely would. It is insane. I agree with you. It's absolutely insane. And, of course, the thinking on both sides is we will win, they will lose, and we'll let, the next generation clean up the radioactive debris. And they're willing to risk all of this because, they've got their bunkers. If this gets out of control, if they lose control of this and it does go nuclear, well, they'll say, oh, gosh darn, we blew that one, and they're off to their various bunkers. The White House staff goes to Mount Weather, Congress goes to the Greenbrier, the Supreme Court judges have their little place that's set up for them, and they'll just go down there and hunker down and just say, well, maybe we could have done something a little bit differently, but too late to worry about that now. Mark, are you there? I guess we lost him.
Yeah. Hello?
Yes, we lost you for a second. What's going on?
Okay. Sorry. I'm saying once we know the missiles are ready to start being fired, I think American patriots should consider attacking these bunkers and not letting these people go into the bunkers and have it the patriots. At least the people who would survive then, you have decent patriots that would survive, maybe come out with something other than radioactive wasteland, rather than the people who actually caused this in the first place, getting into those bunkers and letting the rest of us fry in a radioactive waste. It is a shame because, at least you talk about Russia, at least Russia is supplying shelters for their people. At least they're doing that.
Yes.
They're not doing that for us.
Nope.
They're not the ones starting this either. Putin is doing everything he can to stop World War III from occurring. He's bending over backwards. I don't think I think he thinks they're perfectly capable of winning a ground war, but I know he doesn't. He's not crazy enough to think they'd win a nuclear war. Nobody would win a nuclear war. Okay, we'd all lose. It's like remember there's a song, "The Eve of Destruction."
Yes.
What good is a world in a grave? That's about what it would come down to. There'd be no winners or losers. But and I think Putin understands this. He does come from the Cold War. He does remember this. He was in the military, well, it was KGB at the time, and I think that he realizes. Trump is an idiot. Trump was never in the military. He doesn't understand really what's going on. He's a businessman most of his life. He doesn't understand the workings of this corrupt government, and he doesn't understand how he's being manipulated by countries like Israel, including right for his rude son-in-law, who never should have been in there in the first place, and of course a bum like Bolton, and then Nikki Haley is totally out of her mind. This is what's happening, and Trump is totally incapable of handling it. I just don't know what to do. What's going to happen? I'm hoping maybe Tulsi Gabbard. Maybe I saw her on Jimmy Dore show on YouTube this weekend. Very good.
Yep.
If we can last till 2020, maybe she's got a chance.
No.
Maybe a third party, maybe her and Rand Paul running together. That would be great.
The Democratic Party machine will never let her get near power. They'll do to her what they did to Bernie Sanders, because she's not part of the inside clique, and she's not pro-war. And that's all we're going to get for candidates for the next several elections is pro-war candidates. Right now, half the U.S. economy is tied up in the military-industrial complex. If peace were to break out, the U.S. economy would implode. And so from a purely business point of view, we have to go on building and buying weapons. And in order to justify buying new weapons, we have to use the old weapons up in a war. So let's go have a war.
I don't think the economy would implode. I think if we did what we should do and stop spending over $1 trillion on a military-industrial complex every year, including the wars, if we spent that instead on a decent healthcare system where everybody was covered, like most countries are, and we did a couple other things, infrastructure, a lot of stuff needs to be doing. Spend the money on that. I don't think it would destroy the economy, not if it was done right. It's just what it's just all this military-industrial complex is doing is making certain people rich.
Yep.
It's exposing our troops to very, great dangers. And it's also imposing dangers on the United States as a whole, on the people of this country, who they don't care about. All they care about is their money and their, and catering to a foreign country. And, Israel, unfortunately, has way too much control. So does Saudi Arabia, too, by the way.
Yes.
Saudi Arabia also has too much control over this country. And it keeps on how terrible Iran is. Iran is the perpetrator of terrorism. Iran is trying to stop terrorism. They're trying to help Syria to get rid of the terrorists.
Yes.
Why is Iran a terrorist nation? They're not. They're not all as fanatical as people make them out to be. If they were, you think Iran would be friends with Syria if they thought because Assad is not he's a Muslim, but he's very, very secular. But they get along with him. His wife doesn't even wear one of those, what do you call it again? The kapta, the thing on her head there. She didn't wear that.
The hijab.
She looks very Western. I thought she might have been European.
Yesterday Yesterday on the website, I put up that video I mentioned, Don't Tell Mom I'm in Iran, which is a documentary made by an Israeli documentary filmmaker, and it just shows the Iranian people as just ordinary people, just like us. They go to work, they make a living, they take care of their family, they go out and they have fun. And it puts a very human face on the people of Iran, which is, of course, what corporate media is trying to take away. Anyway, listen, Mark, we're coming up on a commercial break. I got to let you go, and we'll be right back after these words from our sponsors. So stay tuned. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And I was mentioning before, Project Veritas has their third installment of the exposure of the deep state out. And you probably remember the first tape involved this individual who was literally bragging on tape that he was a communist and that he was working to push the communist agenda while on the State Department time. In other words, on the taxpayers' dime, and was laughing and saying, nothing's going to happen. I can't get fired. He's now been fired. Okay, over in Korea, North and South Korea are planning on forming a joint military committee. In other words, they're reunifying the militaries of the two Koreas. And this committee is going to be charged with maintaining communication and prevent any accidental clashes. This is a hugely important step. And to me, it's clear. Korea is going to reunify. They're not going to wait for the United States to declare an end to the war. They've all but ended it themselves. And apparently this third summit went really, really well and was topped off with a visit to Heaven Lake, which is a spiritually important lake in Korea. Moon Jae-in had always wanted to visit the lake and also Mount Pektu, which straddles the border between North Korea and China. And of course, because of all the tensions, he couldn't get there. It was a lifelong dream, and he got to do it. And there's a photo of him just literally bending down and scooping up some of the lake water in his hands. So that was a good moment here. Story coming on out of the BBC, the U.S. ready to restart negotiations with North Korea. Pardon me. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says he's ready to restart negotiations with Pyongyang with the aim of denuclearizing North Korea by 2021. And North and South Korea are clearly reunifying. And as that proceeds, Kim Jong-un isn't going to need his weapons. He's already shut down another major missile launch site. Pompeo is struggling to look like he is still relevant to the process because North and South Korea are clearly leaving the United States behind in all of this. As reported yesterday, the U.S. is opposed to North and South Korea ending the war because that was a carrot that the United States wanted to hold out to get North Korea to do what they want. And I think the two Koreas can decide amongst themselves that the war is over because they were the original belligerents. Anyway, more about that Salisbury poisoning. And these last two, one of them is this very well-known lingerie model, Anna Shapiro, and she's Israeli of Russian descent. And they got sick at this restaurant. Everybody screamed, "Nerve agent." The authorities said, "No nerve agent." Then Anna Shapiro came back and said, "Well, it was rat poison. It was rat poison. Putin wants me dead." Because her father supposedly has ties to the Kremlin, which doesn't really make a lot of sense. It turns out that the lingerie model is married to a guy named Alex King, who once tricked Prince Charles into thinking he was an actor from the popular film The History Boys. So it's all, fun and games. Now, Alex King has been discharged from the Salisbury District Hospital. And he was previously assistant to an aristocratic prankster, self-styled Lord Edward Davenport, who wound up in prison for 8 years, involving a £4.5 million fraud. So you become a media star, and the things that you have done in your past, they will get dug out. More news along that front. Apparently, the EU is having a summit in Salzburg, and they have decided they are not going to adopt any new anti-Russian sanctions over this Skripal case, which is a very wise thing to do because sanctions against Russia cause economic harm to the EU. And more importantly, anybody taking a close look at this Skripal thing understands it was a propaganda smear job. It was a hoax from day one. And here is an article. This is out of the Army Times, and it's talking about a new push to recruit and retain the best candidates for the infantry. And we're going to talk about this when we come back from the next commercial break. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And before we went on the commercial break, I was talking about this story that was posted in the Army Times. It's titled, "A New Push to Recruit and Retain the Best Candidates for the Infantry." And basically, they're saying that the U.S. Army has now set up a special task force on how to get better quality recruits. And the reason for that is that simply to keep the numbers up, to keep people coming on in, putting on the uniform, the U.S. Army, and in fact, all of the services, over the last decade have been lowering the requirements. They lowered the weight requirement. They're allowing people in with past history of criminal activity and drugs. And these are not really people who make good soldiers, but they look good standing there in the uniform. But now that we're on the edge of real warfare, which is going to also include ground warfare, I think somebody at the Pentagon looked at the Army and said, this needs to be brushed up a little bit. Now, the reason the military was lowering the standards is they can't get good people to sign up, because everybody knows there are wars out there. And even though only a small percentage of recruits actually find themselves in combat, they're still in combat, and there's a chance that you could lose important bits of your body. And for the rest, they could spend their entire time in service peeling potatoes or maintaining helicopter transmissions. And there's a lot of recruiting going on TV. Over at taskandpurpose.com, they have an article on how Captain Marvel is the recruiting tool of the Air Force's dreams. And you've probably seen there has been a lot of these comic book movies of late, and more recently, they always seem to tie in with some kind of a military theme. And the image that's being sold is that if you go into the military, you will come out as a superhero. A while back, there was a commercial involving a Marine in dress blues with a Mamluk sword vanquishing a demon. That's the image they're selling. If you're in the military and you're in a uniform, you are a superhero. And everybody's going to look up to you like you're a superhero. And it is, again, more and more propaganda. And speaking of propaganda, this one is just plain silly. There's now this professor, Susan Landau. She's a professor at Tufts University, and she wrote an essay basically saying the Russians are trying to infiltrate the Boy Scouts to indoctrinate them. I don't know, was it the Russians who said the Boy Scouts have to let girls in now? But I mean, this is right out of Cold War paranoia, where the Russians, back in the 50s and 60s, anything went wrong, oh, it's Russian infiltrators, it's Russian subversion. And our government was being subverted. We were just looking in the wrong direction. We should have been looking at Israel. All right, let's take some phone calls. Peter in Los Angeles, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Michael. I'm the one that sent you in that Army Times article.
Okay, good.
And it caught my eye this morning because, you know, I spent a whole lot of time as an infantryman and a ranger and all that stuff. And the U.S. Army has had a problem going back actually to World War II, when there are four mental categories. You take an Armed Forces qualification test when you go in. It's an IQ test. Historically, if you're a low scorer, you end up in the infantry, and if other than that you're like a computer programmer, an air traffic controller, a logistician, or something. But the very last of the people go to the infantry historically, and that was true back in World War II when the best people, you know, were in the technical services. The Army Air Corps was part of the Army, and you know they got all the good technicians and all that kind of stuff, and our infantry performance suffered. It suffered in Vietnam too, where it was clearly the lowest of the low went into the infantry, and we've been trying to clean that up. But if you look at the marketing that's done, like what a great place, it's for one thing, and as you've pointed out a million times, it's an economic draft because people are going in to get jobs. What do you do as a job in the infantry if you get out of the infantry? So people don't want to do that. They don't want to be in harm's way. And it's a real problem in the United States, short of a draft, to attract people in, to actually go out and hook and jab with bad guys.
Yeah,
So,
I think so. But the difference between World War II and World War III is that all of the countries are much more reliant on standoff weaponry, and I'm sure the recruiters are going to be using that, saying, you're not actually going to engage with the enemy up close and personal. Excuse me just a second. Pardon me. I seem to have picked up a little bit of, I picked up a little bit of a cold. They're going to tell these young recruits, you're going to be basically standing off and flying drones and missiles to get the enemy. Of course, what they don't tell you is there are drones and missiles headed right back at you.
and even infantry has gotten pretty technical. I mean, even a squad leader he has like a handheld drone. I mean, that capability is down to the squad level. Like an E5 sergeant has that now.
Yes.
But the essence of it, Mike, in a war like in Syria, in the end, you have to be able to close with the enemy. You have to have people who are willing and able to jump over a wall and strangle somebody to death. That's what the Israelis don't have, and that's why they can't handle Hezbollah. And they could never have taken Iwo Jima or anything like that because that requires getting close. And in the end, against that type of enemy, in the end, war is pretty base.
Yes.
You can do all you want, all the bombing, but you've got to stick a knife into somebody at some point. So it's, but anyway, we've historically had the lowest of our category people that have been in the infantry, and it's got to change. The Germans, by the way, always had the best, and it showed.
You certainly wanted your unit commanders to have a high IQ because they were going to be more likely to spot trouble coming up from the front. as opposed to some dullard who's just sort of daydreaming away.
Well, that's the problem Mike, is it not with the officers so much, because the gateway to promotion in the U.S. Army and the Marine Corps, you're not going to be chief of staff or commandant of the Marine Corps unless you're armed or infantry or some combat arms guy, artilleryman or something. So people get into the infantry because the West Pointers, everybody wants to branch infantry, right? And you're not going to get anywhere in the Marine Corps by being a freshwater specialist or something,
Yes.
So the officers are pretty motivated to get into the combat arms. It's the enlisted men who can join under contract and can pick their MOSs. And nobody in their right mind wants to be in the infantry. And I can understand it. I mean, I hate sleeping outside. To this day, I can't stand camping and sleeping in a ditch rolled up in a poncho and having somebody shoot at you. It's ridiculous.
It is.
But yeah, but that's the problem, Mike. That's the problem. Can I make one more point? Well, you had Mark called in and made some great points, and Leila called in about Britain. The reason why, when we went into Libya, I don't know if you knew this, the French did a lot of the heavy lifting when we went to Libya. Even though the United States flew something like 20,000 sorties, the French did even more. It was because the French APAC basically got them in. Macron and all these guys, got them in. Britain, you know what's going on with Corbyn and everything else. They're absolutely run by their Israeli fifth column. Even the Russians have to put up with it. Putin is constrained by his media and his dark government, his dark government, which is heavily Israeli oriented, it's heavily Jewish, and so this is from all over. The French, the British, the Germans, Russia, they're everywhere, Mike. And of course, we know that they're here. Hell, we can't even criticize them here. So,
yep, it's a bad situation, and I think it's going to end very badly for the entire human race. And then everybody's going to look back and say, "How could we have been this stupid?" Those who are still alive, of course. Okay, anything else, Peter?
No, that's it. Thanks, Mike. Thanks very much.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go and switch over to Jim in Chicago. Aloha, Jim. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, Michael, have you talked about the ecological disaster in North Carolina due to the flooding of hog farms, chicken farms, and coal field mines?
We talked about it back when the storm was first approaching the coastline. And it's not just the farms and everything. It's waste dumps, chemical processing plants. So far, we have not heard anything bad coming out of those nuclear reactors. But yeah, it's a major storm. It is a disaster, a natural disaster. And bad things follow natural disasters.
Yeah, I was reading this morning where they're concerned about, different diseases, including cholera, and I was really shocked to hear that.
Yeah, it's a real possibility. I'm not familiar with how the water systems are being run in the Carolinas, but yeah, if that contaminated farm water gets into the freshwater source and can't be taken out by processing, yeah, we could be looking at cholera there in the Carolinas.
Right. And a final thing, did you read where the Germans are pulling Volkswagen out of Iran?
No, the only thing I read is that next year they're going to stop making the updated Beetle.
Yeah, because I read that this morning where the Germans said, we're not going to be dealing with Iran anymore.
Okay.
Yeah. So you might want to look into that.
All right, I will, definitely.
Okay, then. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. We're going to let you go. Get on back to the news. Getting on back to war and death, grief, and sorrow. Air Force Secretary Heather Wilson is calling for a 24% increase in squadrons in order to prepare for war against a major power. She made this announcement Monday and basically listed China or Russia as the area of concern. So more money, just more money. And so under the expansion plan outlined by Wilson, the Air Force needs to grow by 74 additional squadrons by 2030. She said the number was based on internal reports using intelligence estimates of what the service would need as far as manpower to be victorious in the next conflict. So, anyway. Another little article here, this one coming out of Military Times. The next war might include mind-controlled drones. And DARPA is out there running tests on drones that are controlled directly by brainwaves in order to make them much more responsive, where you simply think where you want the drone to go and it will go there. And you think what you want the drone to do and it will do it. So you take out that little tiny lag of having to move a controller, push a button. And again, it's all very expensive technology, which means the war is going to be expensive. And ultimately, all wars are not just economic in their causes, they're economic in their outcome. Because it doesn't matter how many weapons or personnel you have, the first country to run out of wealth loses. And so having hideously expensive weapon systems is actually a bad strategic decision. Story coming out of FortRuss.com. Excuse me a second. Story coming out of Fort Russ. The U.S. is now admitting that they have nothing that can stop Russia's hypersonic maneuverable weaponry. And the American Anti-Missile Defense Agency is saying the current American interceptors are unable to deal with the maneuverable hypersonic missiles of their enemies. So what's the solution? Oh, we got to give them more money. We need to get them new interceptors. Money, 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 money. Eisenhower did warn us, and boy, it's amazing how prophetic he was. So let's talk about our domestic political situation, and let's start with this whole Brett Kavanaugh circus. Story out of the Political Insider, basically saying if Christine Blasey Ford doesn't testify, Brett Kavanaugh will be confirmed. Now, Grassley set a 10 a.m. deadline tomorrow for Ford to acknowledge that she was going to be at the hearing on Monday. Ford, through her lawyer, has responded saying that she's willing to testify sometime next week, but not Monday, and that there have to be all kinds of terms agreed to ahead of time to make sure that the hearing is fair to Christine Ford, that it's not biased against her. So Ford and her lawyer are trying to act like they're in control of the Senate, dictating when the hearing takes place and under what terms it will be held. So I think what Katz is probably trying to do is they're going to come up with terms that will be simply unacceptable to the Senate, and then they can put the blame for Ford not testifying on the Senate hearing, on the Senate committee, rather than on Ford herself. Now, speaking of Deborah Katz, who is Christine Ford's lawyer, it turns out in addition to being a Washington, D.C. lawyer, she's vice chair of the board of the Project on Government Oversight, and POGO for short. POGO co-signed a letter to Senator Dianne Feinstein and Senator Grassley, along with a variety of leftist groups, demanding the Kavanaugh records. This was part of the obstruction tactic to demand more and more records, and Kavanaugh turned over more records about himself than any other Supreme Court nominee in U.S. history. So where does the Project on Government Oversight get their money? From, among other sources, George Soros and his Open Society Foundation tentacles. So Christine Ford's lawyer basically is working for this Soros-funded group that opposes Kavanaugh. We'll be right back after these commercials. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're talking about domestic politics. We're talking about this circus around Brett Kavanaugh. And apparently, this Representative John Garamendi, a Democrat, of course, from California, got on CNN and said that if Kavanaugh were confirmed without hearing from Christine Ford, that the Democrats should just rise up and make certain that their voice is clear and express their anger. Now, of course, Ford is now saying that she's going to testify, not on Monday. And by the way, the Kavanaugh vote has been delayed. It was supposed to take place today. The GOP caved into the Democrats one more time, and it's scheduled for next week. But at this point, it's very obvious the Democratic strategy is to just delay, pay a bunch of protesters, delay some more, try and dig up more allegations against Brett Kavanaugh. They are desperate to not let this man be confirmed. And they're clearly working outside the constitutional process to do so. And again, the Democrats are out there saying that, got to give Christine Ford the benefit of the doubt. No, we don't. Again, our nation is founded on proof of guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, and an allegation is not proof. Now, Grassley has demanded that Dianne Feinstein turn over the unredacted letter from Christine Ford. She's been stalling on that one. What she let on out had been heavily redacted. And Feinstein is already saying, no, we're keeping this letter. You have to make do with the redacted one. Okay. In all of this talk about an FBI investigation into Kavanaugh over this 36-year-old allegation of attempted rape, Juanita Broderick has basically stepped up and said, I never got an FBI investigation when I accused Bill Clinton of actually raping me. She's making a valid point there. All right, let's take a phone call here from Lenny in California. Aloha, Lenny. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
I'd like to get back to the Russian shoot down. You were talking to someone earlier about it being Syria's fault. But what I find interesting is that the narrative was already prepared by the Israelis and the Americans as to the fact that they said Syria shot the plane down. But what I find even more interesting, Mike, is that Syria hasn't even offered an apology to the Russians for shooting them down. Don't you find that?
Okay, we need to back up a bit. Actually, the first person to publicly say that Syria had accidentally shot down the Ilyushin was Putin. And then basically the narrative developed from that, where these Israeli warplanes were trying to use the Ilyushin 20 as radar cover to sneak into Syria for the attack. And that's why, from Russia's point of view, this is all Israel's fault. Now, Israel is saying it's Syria's fault, it's Iran's fault, it's Assad's fault, blame everybody out there and try and guilt them into going along with the agenda. But again, I think it was a genuine friendly fire accident. I could be wrong. Anyway, listen, we got to take a break for station identification. There should be music playing. And we will be right back. Thank you for the phone call, Lenny. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. The phone lines are still open here. 800-313-9443. And we're talking about the Brett Kavanaugh confirmation. We're talking about Christine Ford. And we've been talking over the last few days about how she is well motivated to go after Brett Kavanaugh. First of all, Brett Kavanaugh's mother, also a judge, ruled against Christine Ford's parents in a foreclosure action. So there is probably some residual resentment there. Christine Ford herself is incredibly liberal, She was a fundraiser for Hillary Clinton. And now we're finding out that she was also working in the abortion pill industry. And she's tied to this abortion pill pharmaceutical company called Corcept Therapeutics. And they manufacture and market an abortion pill drug called mifepristone. In fact, I understand it's the only product they actually do make here. But Christine Ford is a co-author of at least 8 published scientific papers produced by the pharmaceutical giant to promote its pills. So now we have the issue of abortion industry profits as a motive for Christine Ford to have concocted this story. All right. Now, somebody noticed earlier that Christine Ford's high school yearbooks have been taken down from the internet. You know, in the age of the internet, everybody's yearbooks are up there. My yearbook is up there. And apparently somebody realized this was going to happen, and they made copies, and they're now going viral all over the net because these photos and articles inside the high school yearbooks show that Christine Ford went to this very exclusive elite school that basically they spent all their time partying. They talk about a lot of drinking. Some of the photos of Christine are a little, shall we say, risque for high schoolers. But apparently she was a wild child and a party girl, and they don't want you to know that as well. Anyway, moving on from that, Sarah Carter is out there saying that the Department of Justice and the Federal Bureau of Investigation are colluding to defy the Trump declassification order. That what they are going to do next week is they're going to deliver a new set of the documents that still have redactions. The earlier report that the FBI and Department of Justice were going to negotiate with Trump over the redactions, apparently that didn't work out. Trump said, give it to us unredacted, period. His executive order specifically said without redaction. All of the Russia investigation texts and FBI and Department of Justice are saying, well, who do you think you are? The President of the United States? We're not going to reveal our secrets to you. And Trump needs to start firing all these people right now. Sometimes I wish that Donald Trump would wake up one morning and say, gee, I really am the president, and start acting like one. He's coming across as a very weak leader. He's certainly good at self-promotion. There's a lot of video out there, where he's out there talking and, giving out medals and down in South Carolina looking at the flood and everything. But he's not leading the government. He's being led by the government, and that is a serious situation. Sarah Carter is also reporting that the FBI maintained 2 separate sets of books for Spygate. One was an accurate collection of records for the upper echelon of the FBI, and then they made another one just for appearances, one that was softened. And she was on Sean Hannity's show and said that, there was 2 sets of books. One that was telling what was really going on, and another one that was just there for show. Now, we've been talking about Project Veritas, and they're doing amazing work. And one of the things that's really amazing is after all the videos Project Veritas has done, why anybody inside the government or an organization like Planned Parenthood would just speak freely about all this stuff in front of somebody who might have a camera. You'd think people like that would start shutting up, but looking at the videos, ignoring what's being said, there's a lot of arrogance on display from these officials, if you will. So as we mentioned earlier in the show, this communist who was saying he couldn't be fired has been fired. But now the Department of Justice says they will investigate the second Veritas video that exposed some shenanigans in Health and Human Services about slowing things down. And so there's going to be an investigation. Of course, it may be no more real investigation than they did of Hillary Clinton. Excuse me a second. The Justice Department is also asking their Inspector General to investigate the DEA over possible leaks that led to massacres in Mexico. And Inspector General Michael Horowitz said that an internal review had flagged the DEA's Sensitive Investigative Units program as an area of high risk. And say that there need to be more controls in place to ensure that DEA operations, information, and personnel are protected from compromise. Basically, they're saying somebody was leaking information to the drug cartels, probably paid very well for it, and it led to a lot of deaths down in Mexico. Getting on back up here north of the border, this is out of TruePundit.com, we're getting more of these internal emails. And they're being pried out by the court system bit by bit. But recent emails from Special Counsel Robert Mueller's office show that his team members were associating with corporate media reporters outside the office. And first of all, there's the issue about information being leaked to the corporate media, which is a tacky no-no, and I understand Larry Klayman is actually looking at filing a lawsuit against Mueller for the grand jury leaks. But the other problem is that once they were outside the office, they could use their own personal communications device, which are not secured. And if you're sitting in an open restaurant talking about Mueller's sensitive and classified Trump investigation, you can be overheard. This was incredibly reckless behavior. Now, up at Judicial Watch, Tom Fitton is saying they're going to court again, trying to get the Fusion GPS records. And they're before U.S. District Court Judge Reggie B. Walton regarding communications of the Office of the Attorney General with Nellie Orr, the wife of former senior Department of Justice official Bruce Orr, who was critical to the creation of the Clinton DNC dossier, the dodgy dossier, the P dossier, whatever you want to call it here. And the subject of the hearing was the lawsuit that Judicial Watch filed all the way back on March 1st of this year, after the Department of Justice failed to respond to their December of 2017 Freedom of Information Act request. So they're having to go through the court system again. And Judge Walton apparently openly expressed that he shares their frustration with a bureaucracy that is trying to keep secrets. Do you remember the DNC fraud lawsuit? For those of you who don't, here's a quick recap. During the 2016 election, it came on out that the Democratic National Committee, under the command of Debbie Wasserman Schultz, actively worked to prevent Bernie Sanders from winning the nomination. They literally rigged the primaries for Hillary Clinton. And they were promptly sued by a bunch of Democratic donors who said, we donated money to the Democratic Party on behalf of Bernie Sanders, and you guys cheated him. We want a refund. Now, the lawsuit was dismissed initially by a judge on jurisdictional grounds, but the dismissal is in the process of an appeal in the Federal 11th Circuit Appellate Court. And a hearing on the matter has been set for the 25th. And again, delay, drag it out and drag it out. And this fraud lawsuit is no stranger to unusual and atypical occurrences. And the latest is the judge who was hearing this appeal has been recused. Judge Robin S. Rosenbaum has now recused himself from the case. I mean, this case, there's missing information, destroyed evidence, strange, unaccountable deaths of people. It is a mess over there. Now, we were talking yesterday about how activists in Chicago had succeeded in getting the city to say no to Barack Obama's Obama Center, which was going to take up a big chunk, 19.3 acres of a public park. And the people of Chicago wanted to have the park. And this whole project got started because originally they were told this would be Obama's presidential library, which is definitely something that you want to have in your city. And they got bamboozled. The presidential library is going to be elsewhere. This is just going to be an Obama center. It's basically his ego on display. And it went back and forth, and the permitting hadn't been completed, but the construction people are already cutting down the park's trees, which everybody is very upset about. Well, Rahm Emanuel has apparently stepped on in because the Chicago City Council is now set to approve plans for the Obama Center, and here's where it gets really interesting. The Obama Presidential Center is going to pay just $10, that's 10, for a 99-year lease. $10 for a 99-year lease. Okay, let's take a phone call. Fred in Michigan, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, that lease, I would speculate, is brought to you by Mr. Casino Magnate, Talmudic, Kabbalah, Zohar, Ashkenazi, what's his name out there? Oh, man, you know that big
Sheldon
time
Adelson?
casino. Yes, thank you. Him and the Annenberg Group. You know who, let's see, NoPlaceForCorruption.com, guy out of Philadelphia that comes on Sundays or Saturdays with Rick Adams. That guy's been tracking this for about 20 years. So yeah, it looks like Saul Alinsky is reincarnated in the this Talmudic life form, Rob Emanuel. But you know, these unsolved mystery murders of Seth Conrad Rich and his 5 friends, they all were murdered within 5 weeks. There were 6 murders within 5 or 4 weeks.
Well, there was a rapid string of murders. We don't know how closely interconnected all these people were with each other or with Seth Rich. But yeah, during the height of the 2016 campaign, there were several new additions to the Clinton dead bodies list.
Yeah, well, these guys, Mike, the people at AIM, American Intelligence Media, 2 of your callers identified that group earlier this week, I think, Monday. You know, Scott in Texas and Mo in Florida. And they tweaked my memory because Andrew McKibben and this other guy, Douglas Gabriel, Gabriel's former NSA, former Jesuit, and Andrew McKibben and his associates of Leader Technologies, they developed this really advanced internet technology software, and it was hijacked, stolen from them, patent infringements all the way. They went to court, and the judge, they ultimately determined, was big time on the take because he had major holdings in the companies that stole Leader Technologies technology. Mm-hmm. And they also revealed, you spoke earlier about Russia's unparalleled missile technology. I think it's called the Sunburn missile. This hypersonic maneuverable thing. Well, guess what? Andrew McKibben, Douglas Gabriel, and their associates tracked the evolution of that missile technology to Raytheon, which just happened along with Microsoft, and Intel, and about 4 other companies. They went over to some suburb of Moscow, I believe it is, Skolnikov or something like that, Skolnikov, and it's a big time sort of it's definitely high tech R&D, and so essentially, Mike, what Michael Herzog with Brendan O'Connell has elucidated is the fact that, and man, there's the Times of Israel.
Okay, Fred.
O'Connell pulled up.
Fred, can you get to the point? You're kind of meandering all over the place here. What are you trying to say?
What I'm getting to, bro, is this, man. We're being told the Russians are our enemy. Well, yeah, the Bolshevik communist Jews, according to Haaretz, Jerusalem Post, Israel Times, et al., they're the same ones that run communist China. They run the Politburo. There's photographs, etc. And in all these articles, Mike, I wish you would interview Brendan O'Connell sometime, because he's got it all memorized, man. There's just like 500 articles since like 2007, mostly in Israeli or other highly credentialed sources documenting that the Israeli government is in bed with communist Bolshevik Russia and China, with the aid and abetting of U.S. Congress, obviously, via AIPAC and all the rest of these Talmudic Jew organizations, man.
Okay, first of all, I'm troubled by your keep using the word Talmudic Jew and so forth and so on. If you want to talk about Israelis, and there's obviously no secret to the fact that Israel interacts with all kinds of countries all around the world, but the degree of cooperation, saying that they're in bed with these other governments, that I think is an unsupported statement here, especially because ever since what happened with the Aleutian 20, relations between Israel and Russia have definitely become very, very strained. It's a very dynamic situation. Anyway, Fred, thank you for the phone call. We're coming up in a commercial break, and I'm going to have to let you go. So we have another caller waiting on the line, but I'm going to leave him till after the commercial break here. Meanwhile, over in Russia today, they're reporting China denies meddling in the U.S. midterm elections, which they came out in response to Donald Trump's tweet accusing China of meddling in U.S. elections. First it was Russia, then it's China. Trump has fallen into the same bad habit of blaming others for the failings of our own government. He had a chance to fix our election system so it could not be tampered with, and he dropped the ball. We'll be right back after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And yes, we're standing here once again with our collection plate held out to you because we need your help. If we're going to go on doing what we're doing, we do need your assistance. The entire independent media is under attack right now, and that includes going after advertisers or any other funding sources. And for those of you who have donated, you have my thanks and that of the network. And for those of you who haven't donated yet, well, we need you to step up here. And again, any amount will help. There's no such thing as too small of a donation. So the postal address to send a check, money order, or if you prefer anonymity cash, is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. The phone number where you can make a credit card or debit card donation or pledge to be a recurring subscriber is 800-724-2719, extension 1 during business hours, and remember it's Central Standard Time, or extension 3 at all other hours. So the network thanks you. All right, we're going to go back to the phones here to Stuart in Florida. Aloha, Stuart. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Okay, Mike, thanks. First, let me embarrass you a little bit by telling you what a great show you have. I've been listening for about 4 months. I remember you from years ago, I think, and a friend reminded me of you, and I started listening, and I never regretted it. So anyway, I hope you feel fully embarrassed now.
I do.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to give you a heads up that there's a big counteroffensive by ISIS in Deir ez-Zor, and it's being reported by Al Masdar News. And the thing is, they're not going. I don't think they're going to let Putin get out of there without getting into a war. Whatever happens, whatever he tries to do, you're right there to try to provoke something. And
yes.
Personally, I think after this latest outrageous Israeli attack, where they were deliberately, hiding and deceiving, the Syrian air defense, they should have went in there and bombed an airfield. Make sure those planes don't take off anymore. I mean, there has to be some consequence. It's just, Russia, Putin keeps drawing red lines, and they get violated, and he does nothing. And it's like, I understand he's bending over backwards, but pretty soon his back is going to break. And I just think he's got to, I don't think there's any way to avoid it.
Putin does not want to let the situation escalate. Russia and Syria and whatever Iran's presence actually is in Syria, they pretty much have won the war, except for Idlib. And obviously all of these Israeli actions, the U.S. actions, all of these ships showing on up is an indicator that the United States is not going to allow Syria to win this war. They're just looking for an excuse to just go on in, whether it's going to be a false flag attack of some kind. Again, we were reporting yesterday where the language has been changed, and they're no longer talking about a chemical weapons attack. They're saying any attack. And if this report about an ISIS counterattack from within Idlib, well, obviously Syrian and Russian forces are going to have to respond to it. And the U.S. may say, oh, look, there's an attack going on, and just launch.
But this is, I think, this is in Deir ez-Zor, which I think is in the southeast.
It's in Deir ez-Zor.
It's right close to a U.S. base.
That's right. You did say that at the beginning. I'm still focused on the situation in Idlib. I'll take a look at that and see if I can get a confirmation.
One other thing I'll let you go is, you often say Trump's got to put on his brass knuckles. Trump will tell you what you want to hear. I learned the hard way after voting for him. He's total BS, and his cowardice is just unbelievable. But you can't even get him to declassify documents that would expose his enemies. And the latest I heard on that is that they're not going to be totally declassified because the other side is going to kind of send it out in dribs and drabs, hoping the Democrats will win the election.
Well, I agree. And, Trump is proving to be a very weak leader. And it's amazing when you look at how easy he is to manipulate by the deep state. I mean, he's giving them all the wars that they want. You have to wonder, why are they still after him as hard as they are? And I think it may be because they're worried that one day he may wake up and say, yes, I'm the president, and say, let's get a real investigation into the Clinton Foundation. Let's get a real investigation into intelligence agencies that are running guns and drugs all over the place. But from where I sit, it almost feels like the federal government is starting to tear itself apart.
Yeah. Well, let's hope so. So anyway, thanks, Mike. Have a good one.
All right, thanks an awful lot. I'm doing a search. I can't find any confirmation on that Deir ez-Zor ISIS attack, but I'm sure it'll be there soon. All right, we're going to take another break for commercials. We'll be right back. And Aloha America, welcome back to our show here, and I did find a confirmation that ISIS launched a big counterattack in southeast Deir ez-Zor. It apparently did not go all that well. It's actually been going on for the last 24 hours. But the U.S.-backed Syrian Democratic Forces have reportedly captured the strategic town of Baguz Fugani in southeastern countryside of Deir ez-Zor. And apparently the SDF were working in coordination with French and U.S. armies, is what they're saying, armies, that implies boots on the ground, and they achieved a major breakthrough, and they were able to crack the Islamic State's lines after U.S. attack helicopters repeatedly bombarded the terrorists, forcing them ultimately to fall back. So that's the story on what's happening with that. All right, pardon me. Let's take another phone call. Richard, North Carolina. Aloha, Richard. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, I probably shouldn't have called. I'm sitting here getting more infuriated by what the U.S. is doing and what Israel's doing in the Middle East and in Syria, to be more specific. And I really shouldn't have called, but I get so upset when I hear what these people are doing.
Well, I understand that. I hear that from a lot of people calling the show. I mean, the degree of anger that's out there is just increasing. And,
I've been aware of the perfidy of the United States since the Vietnam War, and I was an activist back then. And I just am appalled by what our country is doing. I'm appalled by what Israel is doing. And I wish there was something I could do concretely to help, but there's nothing I can do. I feel so, pardon me, hopeless about that.
Well, all that we can really do is work to keep ourselves fully informed as to what's really going on, so that we're not drinking the propaganda Kool-Aid being poured on us by the corporate media, and to work to educate those around us as to what's really going on. Because ultimately, again, without the willing and eager support of the civilian population, war becomes a very, very difficult thing to carry off. People don't want to pay for it. They don't want to send their children. They don't believe it's moral and right. And I think we're heading into a situation where the U.S. is starting all these wars all over the place, and ultimately, I think they're going to lose.
I think they are too, and I hate to say it, but I hope that they do lose.
Well,
sorry.
I'm not sure I want to go through that, but I'm just trying to be objective here.
I know you are, and I appreciate that. And I really, really appreciate whatreallyhappened.com, and I really appreciate RBN, and I'm so glad you exist because, well, I have to admit that when I listen, I get pissed off about a whole lot of things that are going on. But I got to tell you, I think you're the best information source available. There are a few others like Veterans Today and some other things that are really good too. But I really appreciate being able to listen to you, and that's why I support RBN, and I do as much as I can always to financially support RBN. So keep up the good work, okay?
As long as I can. As long as I can. Thank you for the phone call and the kind words, Richard. We're going to switch over to Jim in New York. Aloha, Jim. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, hi, Mike. Yeah, I agree with your previous call. It's very depressing. And I also agree with Stewart that they're going to keep pushing Putin and keep pushing him until they get some sort of conflict. But, I was going to call, I initially called about, did you ever see the movie 3 Days of the Condor?
Oh, yes. One of my favorites.
The last 5-10 minutes with Robert Redford and Cliff Roberts. Cliff Robertson says, we play games. How to destabilize the regime, how to overthrow. Is there a cheaper way to... And people should see that movie. They told us 40-something years ago that they were going to invade the Middle East. But, I was struck by, what happened to the 1970s type liberals who hated the CIA. Now they love the CIA.
Well, it's not the same people, and the liberalism, it's not the same philosophy. Back in the 1970s, liberalism basically really did consist of the intellectuals who were trying to bring about a better world. Today, anybody who wants to feel superior just says, I'm a liberal. That makes me automatically superior to you conservatives, so just do what I tell you, listen to what I say, and don't question. And they've turned what at one point was a serious political philosophy into just a word game. And today's liberals are just walking around just looking for any reason to be offended so that they can go on the attack against somebody.
Yeah, but again, I think I pointed this out a couple months ago. They're liberal on all these BS issues, but when it comes to the Palestinians or the wars, they're all in. Or by their silence, they don't mind.
That's absolutely true here. And, you know, it's kind of hard to describe us as having a democratic system when the two major rival political philosophies are both representing the ultra-rich.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very unfortunate, but I share your previous caller's consternation. I mean, I've called my congressman. I've called them about, and the president, 4 times, stay out of Syria, and no one listens.
Nope, they don't.
It's very depressing. And I'm afraid the best we can hope for is a Soviet Union-style collapse, which would get ugly, but it's worse than a nuclear war.
No, I think a nuclear war would be a lot worse than a Soviet Union-style collapse of this government. You know, but something's going to happen. We don't know what, but it's very obvious the U.S. system, the global system, cannot keep going on the way it's going right now. Something has to break. Something has to let go.
Oh, no, I meant a nuclear war would be far worse than a Soviet Union style. That's what I meant. But thank you so much, and keep up the great show. Thank
you. I will, just as long as I can. Thank you for the phone call, Jim. Now, Hillary Clinton is out there flapping her gums again, and she was being on Rachel Maddow's show, continuing this 24/7 media Russiagate hysteria. And Hillary Clinton was out there talking about Putin's 3-dimensional chess, and she basically went on to say, I think I was an obstacle to Russia's plans to undermine and disrupt our democracy. I think I was an obstacle to impose greater authoritarian control in Russia. I think they wanted to get me out of the way. So here's Hillary Clinton saying, I'm the victim, I'm the victim, I'm the victim. Feel sorry for me. And I do wish she would shut up. And part of this, obviously, she's still trying to boost sales for her book, What Happened, which the last time I saw one in the store was in the manager's closeout bin. So let's skip on down here a little bit. This one is kind of weird here. Apparently, George Soros is out there interfering in Romania's internal affairs, trying to basically block a referendum vote on the traditional family. And so Amnesty International, which is one of Soros-funded operations, wants to block this traditional family referendum in Romania, which, if it passes, will define marriage as between a man and a woman. And I'm not even sure why Soros would really care that much about it, but that's where he's doing. This one is weird. Over in Arizona, their state school board is revising their curriculum. And apparently, Superintendent Diane Douglas tapped this individual, Joseph Kazel, to be in charge of Arizona's standards for teaching evolution. The problem is this guy thinks the Earth is just 6,000 years old and insists that dinosaurs were present on Noah's Ark, but only the young ones. The adult ones were too big to fit. And he actually said all of this stuff in an interview with the Phoenix New Times, written by Joseph Flaherty. And so this Bible banger is out there. He's going to be in control of Arizona's proposed new state science standards on evolution, and he's going to stop it from being science, and he's going to basically use the public schools to teach religion, which I thought we were over that fight. I mean, schools are about education. If you want to talk about fairy tales and myths about angels on the head of a pin, that's what the churches are for. And this gentleman is clearly ignorant of, or simply refuses to acknowledge, the vast amount of hard scientific repeatable evidence that the Earth is far older than 6,000 years and the dinosaurs did die out long, long before human beings evolved. So I feel sorry for those Arizona kids. They're going to get their brains all messed up here. Now, do you remember Cody Wilson? This was the guy from Austin, Texas, who developed data files for 3D printed guns, and he was giving them away for free on his website. Then there was an injunction against him, which he fought on First Amendment grounds, saying that plans to make a gun are not the gun. And then there was another injunction hit him. Now, all of a sudden, something very weird is going on, because it's being claimed that he has been charged with sexual assault and that he's now fled to Taiwan. This reeks of setup because apparently this girl set up this account on sugardaddymeat.com, 17-year-old girl, and she wanted to do this. She voluntarily went and signed up on sugardaddymeat.com, and she had sex with a 30-year-old man on August 15th, for which she was paid $500. And they're trying to say that this user named Sanjuro was Cody Wilson. This reeks of a setup or a smear job. And I'm waiting to hear from Cody himself as to what is going on. But it seems like anybody who is a threat to officialdom, the status quo, somehow they get roped into some kind of a sex crime allegation. It's amazing here. Okay, over at Apple, as you know, they're coming out with iOS 12. And apparently part of the new system is Apple is going to start assigning trust ratings to users of their phones based on phone call and email habits. No idea what they're going to use with it. They're claiming that this will help identify and prevent fraud by sharing the information about how you use your device, including the approximate number of phone calls or emails you send and receive, will be used to compute a device trust score when you attempt a purchase. And the scores are stored on Apple's servers. I'm not sure I'm comfortable with that. We know that the criminals are going to find a way around it very, very quickly here. Interestingly enough, though, Apple has announced a new smartwatch that, in addition to tracking heart data, can actually run an EKG, detect atrial fibrillation, promising it will save lives. And apparently one of the largest insurance companies out there, John Hancock, is now saying that all future life insurance will be based on people wearing these health trackers, so that John Hancock knows you are living a healthy lifestyle, that you are doing regular workouts and healthy food purchases. privacy advocates are out there saying this is kind of a little out there. We want the old-fashioned life insurance. John Hancock is saying no. That if you want life insurance for them, you have to let your health be monitored continuously by the insurance company. Now, I don't have a problem with auto insurance companies giving you that little plug-in thing that you put into the standard socket underneath the steering wheel to monitor your driving, to basically determine what your rates ought to be. 'Cause that's usually only temporary anyway. This is, I think, a little intrusive. And we're just getting into the situation of having no privacy left whatsoever. Now, iPhone owners are saying that now the all-new iPhone XS and XS Max are being launched. All of a sudden, they're seeing battery life seems to have been cut in half in the older models. And we've seen this accusation every time Apple comes out with a new model watch. The older ones will slow down. Their batteries will only hold half the charge in order to incentivize people to get the new hot phone here. Now, Apple is saying that the recently released iOS 12 is responsible for the decline in battery performance because it does so much more when it's running on your iPhone. I'm not sure if I believe that or not. Okay, Barclays customers got hit by an online glitch. They were locked out of their online accounts for hours today. The bank said it's technical problems. The mobile phone app was still working, though. Apparently over in China, they've started using a facial recognition system for students to pay for their meals in the cafeteria. Apparently you have an account already set up, there's money in it, or it's linked to some kind of payment system, and you simply walk by this kiosk, it takes a second, and then you are cleared to go on in and get your meal. All right. We're going to take a break for commercials, back with the last segment of our program after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Last segment of our program today here. We're talking a little bit about computers here. And we have talked for a while about how hackers will use your machine to mine Bitcoins for them. And they go after Bitcoin, Monero, and these other cryptocurrencies, and they're being mined by fraudsters who are using Eternal Blue, which was one of the U.S. National Security Agency hacking tools that was leaked last year. And so this report from the Cyber Threat Alliance says detected cases of illicit cryptocurrency mining have skyrocketed to 459% in 2018 compared to last year. And that surge is linked to the leak of Eternal Blue. It's a tool to exploit vulnerabilities in outdated Microsoft Windows-based systems. So thanks an awful lot, National Security Agency. You really have made us a lot more secure. Over at Government Payment Service Inc., or GovPayNet, it's a place where you can go to make various payments related to government. But apparently it also has a major security weakness, and there are concerns that this site has leaked more than 14 million customer records, including names, addresses, and worse, credit card information. So the way it works is after somebody pays for a bill on the GovPayNet website, they are directed to a confirmation page for each transaction, which includes a unique string of numbers at the end of the URL. But Krebs on Security found out that hackers could simply type in different receipt numbers in the web address and they would be shown other people's bills. Now, if somebody were to automate that process to simply resubmit that URL with different receipt numbers, they could basically mine off all of that information there. Supposedly today was going to be the day that they were going to test this emergency system that lets the president text every U.S. cell phone all at once. part of the reason is Americans are appalled by this. They're threatening to turn off their phones in protest. They're concerned that he'll start using this system the way he uses Twitter, and we'll be getting all these tweets, these emergency texts on our cell phone from the White House complaining about the Mueller probe, the Department of Justice, the FBI, and so forth and so on. But apparently the major reason they're putting it off, it's going to be on October 3rd, is because FEMA is still dealing with the aftermath of Hurricane Florence, and they just don't want to divert any resources here. Apparently, if you are a subscriber to Verizon, Sprint, AT&T, and the other wireless carriers, this message cannot be blocked. There's no way to block it. Which, in the event of a real emergency, you wouldn't want to block it anyway. But again, I share the concern. Trump could turn this into another platform for shouting out to the American people, and I would not be at all happy about that. Okay, there's the music. Time for me to get on out of here. I got errands to run this afternoon. Please stay tuned for John Stedmiller. I'm sure he's got lots of interesting things to share with you. Take what you learn here, share it with everybody that you know. Please keep reminding everybody that the corporate social media, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Google, are heavily censoring and filtering conservative points of view to try and shift the election this November. Please donate to Republic Broadcasting. Please donate to whatreallyhappened.com. We really need your help. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.